I'm looking around at my perfect life and I was like, man, it's true. You set goals, you work hard, you achieve, good job. Until a doctor said to me when Michael was 4 months old, your son is blind. What I learned from my dad is look for the gains, not the loss. Always looking for the gains, always looking for the lesson, always looking for how you could do better. And honestly, Joe, I listen to your podcast all the time. It's the stuff we all talk about in the regular success realm, getting the tools that you need, all the things. But for some reason, in the blind community, folks are skipping over that. Stop letting the world tell you what your own story is. Because honestly, Michael, when he was 6 years old, met Eric Weihenmayer, the first blind mountain climber to summit Everest.
Welcome to the Hard Way podcast with Joe DeSena, founder and CEO of Spartan Races. We're teaching you how to overcome your obstacles in your life the same way we teach our 10 million plus Spartans to overcome obstacles on the course, with insight from the smartest, most accomplished experts from every corner of the world. Get ready to elevate your life today.
Joe DeSena here, CEO and founder of Spartan and host of the Hard Way podcast. I've got Kristin Smedley on. Kristin, welcome. You're in a monsoon in Philly.
Joe, I love my town. I love this city, but I do not love all the rain we be getting. But I am loving being here, getting to chat with you today.
Philly's pretty tough, I've heard. I have a buddy of mine, Jimmy Benz, who said it's rugged these days. Is that accurate?
Yeah, accurate, yes. We are definitely a city that has grown up on grit. So you really do have to employ that around here these days. It's actually a good part of my foundation. So I'm a Philly girl through and through.
I love it. You grew up in Philly?
Yeah, I was born in Northeast Philly, and then my parents moved us out just into the suburbs to get a great education. Thank goodness. But and left for a little while, chasing dreams and stuff, and happy to be back here and raising my family here.
So you grew up in Philly. Anything remarkable about, you're a remarkable person now. So I'm always curious what went on in your childhood to make you who you are.
It's interesting, Joe. My parents were the kind of people. So people always say, how are you so resilient? How do you have this optimistic way of life? Look, I was, to be very short, I was raised by a man that said going off to the Vietnam War saved his life and gave him opportunity that he wouldn't have had. My dad he grew up in one of the worst neighborhoods in Philadelphia, right? Homeless at about 14, couldn't even think about finishing high school. He was just trying to stay alive. Then he gets drafted into the Vietnam War and comes home to a country that was hating him for it, that they made him go, right? But he looked at that as an opportunity to get out of what he had left in the first place and really harness everything he learned there, harness whatever possible resource he had to build a better life. And he certainly did do that for me. I have 4 brothers. It was not easy. And my dad was a guy working shift work, around the clock just to give us a great education. And I still have no idea how he did it. But he was at all of my ball games. He was coaching a lot of my teams. He did not grow up on fields, in Little League baseball and soccer and all that kind of stuff. He was just there as a dad, cheering me on. And Joe, cheering me on I'm 52 years old. That was back when there were no girls' leagues. It were boy leagues and boy leagues only. And I had to literally fight my way to be on fields and courts and on the diamond. And boy, did I have a good time with that.
It's funny. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about, we have 2 boys and 2 girls. And I'm thinking, gee, I wonder if my girls would speak that highly of me when they get older. So your dad was tough as nails. Anybody that came back from the Vietnam War and said, oh man, that changed my life in a positive way, had to be a tough SOB.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he was. But he learned to really, what I learned from my dad is look for the gains, not the loss in a challenge, right? Always looking for the gains, always looking for the lesson, always looking for how you could do better. And one of the most important and probably very relatable stories I can tell you about that is when I was in 5th grade. It was so new to have girls' sports. We were the first girls' team as a softball team at my elementary school, and there had never been a championship win. We won the first ever championship for this school as a softball team, right? And I was one of the star pitchers. I was the backup pitcher to my best friend. We've been competitive our whole lives. We're still best friends. And then we got called up to the varsity team for the next year, and I was ready to go. My dad's like, oh, no. You still got leadership you need to learn. You've got a team here that still needs a leader on it, and we need a starting pitcher, right? So I was like, Are you kidding me? I mean, I'm in 6th grade and he's telling me you need leadership skills to learn, as opposed to me being like, no, I'm going to be on the A team. So anyway, we get into this situation. We were in the game against the team we beat for the championship the previous year, right? And I was a nightmare, Joe. I mean, I'm like walking batter after batter, and the score just keeps going up for them. And I'm looking at my dad like, get me out of this mess. Are you kidding me? Now, this is also a man, I told you, he worked around the clock, all these shifts, right? He's driving 5 kids to all these fields. It's not a man you want to disappoint and waste his time. So he calls timeout and comes out to the mound. I'm like, all right, I'm ready to hand him the ball. Get me out of here. And he's like, no, 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 no. You're staying in here. I'm like, are you out of your mind? Right. And he goes, Kristin, what are you doing out here? I said, clearly, I don't know. He's like, you're one of the best pitchers in the league and you're blowing this. I'm like, I know. Okay, lesson learned. Get me out of here. And he says, no, here's the problem. You're trying to win this game all by yourself with only your talent. And you're not showing up today. You've got a whole team of talent behind you and you're forgetting all about them. So then he says what no pitcher wants to hear, right? He goes, you're going to throw them so every single batter can connect and hit that ball. I'm like, well, now you've lost your damn mind. Are you kidding me? Right? So he's like, no, you're going to let them hit every ball and let your team remind you of what they can do. And oh my God, Joe, I did. I'm throwing them. These girls are cracking the ball. My team's diving, running double plays, stuff I hadn't seen them do in so long. And if Hollywood was writing this story, I'd say we rallied and we won. But I got us in such a hole that we couldn't come out of it. But I learned my lesson that day that I didn't have what it took that day, and that it took me too long to rely on the team that was built behind me, right? To be by my side and help us win. And when I tell you, as we'll go through, I'm sure, in this conversation, stuff that's happened to me along the way, I consistently find myself back on that pitcher's mound in 6th grade thinking about, what team members do I have? What team members do I have to recruit? I cannot go at this hard stuff by myself. And that's how I've been able to do the things I've been able to do.
Ancient Spartans believe the same thing. Like, you don't do anything alone. Think about raising children. It takes a village.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. 100%.
What's going on? You've got children.
Oh man, have I got some kids. Yeah. I knew from the time I was 5 that I was going to be a teacher. I'm one of those freaks that just knew it, planned my whole life for it. I'm also an overachiever. I don't know if it comes from being an only girl and with that dad that I had that was like, to whom great things were given, great things are expected, was kind of how I was raised. And I was all in for all of that, right? And I did all the things. I had great success in everything I tried. And then I got the degree, landed the job, married the guy, built the house, did everything. But my biggest dream was to become a mom. And I think it was because I had such a great role model in my mom, and my dad and people around me. Our village was tight and wonderful. And there I was, the happiest person in the world. I finally became a mom in the year 2000. I'm looking around at my perfect life and I was like, man, it's true. You set goals, you work hard, you achieve, good job. Until a doctor said to me when Michael was 4 months old, your son is blind. And not an ounce of preparation, not a ton of preparation could have prepared me for that moment. When they said that, I mean, you're a parent, Joe, as you're getting ready for that baby to come, it's like, don't we start out with like, I just want a healthy child. And then it's like month by month, then I was buying the little Phillies onesies, right? And then the Eagles hats and all the things. And I'm envisioning, I was an athlete and I was pretty talented, but he'll be even better, right? He'll be on the pitcher's mound for the Phillies. I was just for St. Ephraim in Region 19, right? Maybe he'll be the quarterback, maybe all these things, and valedictorian in his wedding. And then the doctor said, your son is blind. And in an instant, all of that went completely dark. And, the only question I could think of, because I had no knowledge, no point of reference of blindness, all I could think of was to ask that doctor, will he play baseball? Can you imagine what that doctor says at parties now and on the podcast he's on? Like, what kind of question is that? But that was my reference point. And he was like, I don't know what your son's going to do, but baseball is not one of the things. And then all he said to me was, I don't know what to tell you, but good luck. And do you mind picking up your stuff and yourself off the floor, because our waiting room is jam-packed and we need this room? Not a good way to start that journey.
Well, it sounds like you've pulled it all together. How did you do it? Was it because of that day on the pitcher's mound where you realized, you had a team around you?
It wasn't, I didn't remember that pitcher's mound moment until it was actually my son, Michael, at 3.5 years old, when I was about to give birth to his younger brother, my second child. I was in a moment of, I was raised in very strong faith. And I had walked away from it for 3 years because, in my opinion, it was, what kind of a God does something like this to a little kid, nonetheless? He's not seen anything. And it was a moment of what happens if the second one is affected? There's no way. I mean, I was faking my way through Michael's 3 years, praying blindness away every single night and waking up pissed off every single morning that it was still there and trying to smile, trying to get through it. And then Michael bounced into my room that morning and he said, "Mommy, isn't this the best day ever? Why would you think this is the best day ever?" What I didn't say out loud was, "You're never going to have a best day. Like, your best day is a fraction of my best day." So I said, "Michael, why would you think it's the best day?" And Joe, his outlook was, "Sun is shining. I got all my toys and I'm so happy." And in that instant, it was like lightning, right? That everything just lit up and I thought, "Oh my God, I've had my dreams for this kid. That's what I've been pissed off about. My dreams for him. This isn't about him. Our lives as parents," and I know we do it out of love, their lives aren't about us. They're about them. And our job is to guide them to be their hero, not to be their hero, right? They need to be their own hero and we're just the guide. So in that moment, I was like, oh my God, I started seeing the entire thing differently, that it was really all about Michael. And I just needed to get him the tools that he needed and then follow his lead. And that was when I realized that, I'm like, oh boy, I have no idea how to do any of this. Like, I get it. This is his road, his path, his journey, but I had no idea how to do any of it. And that's when I was on that pitcher's mound again going, okay, all right, who do we need as the coach here, right? Who do we need that's been down this road before? And that's when I started finding parents. I found successful blind people, then I wanted to know their parents, right? What did they do in the years leading up to climbing Mount Everest and becoming an architect and all the things? And that's when I put those teams, those role models in place.
That was 2004.
Yeah, 2003, Mitch, my second one, was born. And that's when I started being their guide on the side. In blindness, there's a term sighted guide, where you walk alongside a blind person just to help navigate in a tricky space to help them stay independent. And I learned, I think all parents should look at it as we are the sighted guide on the side of our kids. It's tough though. It's tough when they want to, my kids learn the transit system. My blind sons know the transit system of the city of Philadelphia inside and out. My son Mitch he's now a junior in college. He I have a sighted daughter, also my youngest. He just took her to a Phillies game while they were home for a break this weekend, on the entire transit system, all the way down to the stadium and back. I mean, the stuff that they've been able to do because I got out of their way has been extraordinary.
That's an amazing story. So he's doing very well. How many children does he have?
Michael, Mitchell, and Carissa Michael just finished college recently, and Mitch and Chris are still in college.
So 3 children. What's next? What's going on now?
Now it's time. I think the world would be, well, look, the world was going to be okay with me if I sat back and said, I got 2 blind kids and this sucks, and here's some disability checks and you're good to go. That's okay. And I wasn't okay with that. And I know that the world was going to be okay with me saying, all right, Michael ended up graduating top 0.5% at Penn State University, summa cum laude, achieved everything. He's working a dream job in corporate America. Mitchell's right behind him. My daughter's on a full ride for basketball in college. Kristin, great job. Sit down, put your feet up, go get a beach house, right? The world would have said, you've done your thing. And I'm like, that's not fair. That's not fair for me to know all the things I know and know that this community, the blind community, still after 5 decades has a 70% unemployment rate. 85% of blind kids are dropping out of college because they're not given the skills that they need to navigate systems not built for them, right? Who am I to sit back and sit on the beach and allow those statistics to still happen. And I get it. Parents are exhausted after beating a system like that. So I teamed up with some folks that are blind and low vision and put together a new nonprofit where we are going out and teaching folks the Thriver formula that I realized were the elements of my boys having success. And honestly, Joe, I mean, I listen to your podcast all the time. It's the stuff we all talk about in the regular success realm, taking responsibility, getting the tools that you need, all the things. But for some reason, in the blind community, they're folks are skipping over that for these kids and adults. But when they harness that, when you harness the elements of success, and like I said, the Thriver formula, get the tools you need to access a world that you can't see. And when the playing field is leveled in terms of accessibility and reasonable accommodations, what I've seen is that people like my sons have a competitive advantage. And when workplaces hire them, like right now it's Disney that my son is working for, they are now realizing the competitive advantage they have in their space because of people like my son and the stuff that he's doing down there, which to Michael is a typical day in solving problems. So many of our kids are like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm supposed to juggle all this and manage this problem. And my son's like, I'm solving problems every 35 seconds in my
Yeah,
day.
from the second he wakes up. I mean, that's our message, right? Our message is take a look at a plant in a greenhouse where everything is organized and they're watered on time and the sunlight comes in and there's no weather versus like a plant on the side of a mountain on a storm. And which plant do you want to be? So yeah, adversity is good. And the other thing is, I would imagine, you correct me if I'm wrong, he's probably honed every other sense, or they've probably honed every other sense because that sense is not available to them.
The way that Michael describes it, because I thought the exact same thing. His thing is more about focus. And Michael described this to me one time, and he's so much more eloquent than I am with it. But he described it as vision is such a crutch, and it actually gets in the way of using so much of your brain because you just have it right there, right? As opposed to, he'll say to me, Mom, and I'm trying to solve a problem or figure something out, he'll say, close your eyes, right? Like really embrace this. Think about it on all levels, as opposed to just what you're seeing in front of you. Even when I'm like editing, Mitch and I just recorded the audio version of my first book. And when I stop looking at the equalizer to see where the gaps are and listen instead, it's tremendous. But Michael's definition of it is focus and use other elements of creativity in your brain. He's like, man, if you sighted people would harness the amount of brain that the rest of us, in the blind community are using, we could really get a lot further, a lot faster.
What's the name of the latest book?
The latest one is a children's book called What I Can Be Is Up to Me. I got a little frustrated, I got to be honest, with the adults in this world. I mean, I did a short film. Now we have a feature film that's going into pre-production, which is great to change the story of blindness for everybody. But I thought, you know what? Too many kids between TikTok, Instagram were all coming to me saying, I wish I had a mom like you. My parents aren't like you. They don't think I can do anything. They won't let me take any risk. So I'm like, you know what? Forget what the world says about you. Forget what your parents have as expectations. You believe in you. You know what you can do. Stop letting the world tell you what your own story is. Because honestly, Michael, when he was 6 years old, met Eric Weihenmayer, the first blind mountain climber to summit Everest. And of course, he's gone on. You probably know his story. He's gone on to do all.
I know Eric, yeah.
I mean, he's such a cool friend of ours. And at 6 years old, he says to Michael, listen, buddy, let me tell you something. You're going to have all kinds of sighted people tell you things you can't do. You ask them, which one of your friends has climbed Mount Everest? And when they say none, say that's a shame because my blind friends do stuff you can't do, And then like in Michael's head, that was like, okay. And he never saw another limit on his life. That's what all of our kids, my dream is that all kids could grow up with that kind of outlook, no matter what us goofball parents put on them. I always say, Joe, imagine, they go off to school with their backpack. They've got the giant boulders of our dreams in there, and they've got their own. Of course, they can't soar under the weight of all that. Get that out of there. See what they can do. That was the beauty of having blind kids. I didn't know what they could do. I was like, all right, let me see what you got. And boy, have we gone to some really cool places.
Goofball parents, we put limits on our kids for sure, especially, globally. We all do it. I can imagine that's multiplied by 5 when there's some sort of disability. You saw it firsthand. And when you rip that Band-Aid off and you let them go, pretty unbelievable. And that's what you've seen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ripping the Band-Aid off within reason. So I don't want people to think that I just, woke up that day and said, let's do it. We're going to take on everything. I looked at every resource available. And honestly, even though the K-12 system in the public school system in this country is so screwed up in many areas, there are by national law, things in place like the individualized education plan. When you look at that, and you use that tool to structure their education and hold people at the school accountable, which is what I did. I mean, thank God I had a teaching background, right? And I was able to come in there with at least a little bit of credential and muscle. We harnessed the power of that tool. And honestly, I get nervous talking about it because I feel like if every parent knew about the IEP and what it can do for a kid, every parent's going to want one now, right? The lines are going to be astronomical. But it really, it's structured in a way of what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What do we need to do differently? How can we teach you differently? What other kinds of resources do you need to come in? My sighted daughter didn't have that. I was like, I had no idea what was happening in her education. But my boys sure went through it. And we had 8 meetings a year to really tie into who's in that classroom, who's working with my kid, who's got this going on, who's making it accessible. The beauty of that tool is that not a lot of people harness. You put that in place, right? And the parent leads it, but then there's a transition that happens. And this is what has to happen with all of our kids in the K-12 at some point, little by little, we start transferring that leadership, that power, that responsibility over to the kids. And then by the time my boys were in high school, they ran their IEP meetings. They managed all of it. They did all of the communication, the PowerPoints, the everything, the evaluations. So when they went off to college, Joe, I didn't make one phone call. I didn't have one meeting. I drove them. Where they needed to go for interviews. Never had one conversation with a university. They went and found their own dreams.
Love that. This is a lesson for me. I got to drop mine off. We have to drop ours off this summer, and I'm really nervous about it. And I feel like I've helped too, even though I'm a maniac, goofball parent. I'm a maniac. I feel like I've helped too much. All right, let's take what you've learned. You just gave me, first of all, you're incredibly articulate. I can't wait to read some of the books you've written because clearly you're smarter than me. And
I don't know about that.
But let's take some of the things you've learned all the way back from when Dad was on that pitcher's mound and before. How do we apply some of this stuff to our own lives, parents or not? Like, give me 3 things that we should apply to our own lives to make our lives better.
Listen, my number one thing, and I know this is going to be tough. It sounds a little lofty, and you can come back at this many times a day. It's taking 100% responsibility for your life, right? And in that 100% responsibility, that's not 99. That's not like, okay, I got this, but my ex-husband is a total screwball that bankrupted us. Yeah, that happened to me, but still, I'm responsible for making things happen and feeding my family, getting them through school. It's my kids had to take 100% responsibility for what it is they want to achieve. Now, for Michael, when he was going after jobs, okay, he comes out of Penn State, he's top in his industry of all undergrads coming out. And Penn State is crazy, right? They all drink the Kool-Aid, they bring the people in, they want 100% job placement. So he had everything going for him. And employers were still saying no because of that white cane. Yes, we could have sat there and said, screw this world sucks and it's their fault. They're not seeing my value. Instead, we said, yes, that sucks. But what's happening in those interviews? What are you doing in the interviews? Are you disclosing that you're blind, and how are you disclosing? And then Michael figured out, oh boy, I need to change this. I need to communicate my value and make them understand if they don't hire me because of my lived experience, they're never going to beat their competitors. So he had to take responsibility to communicate in a different way. So anything and I challenge your listeners all day long, Make a little tally mark. Oh, am I blaming somebody here or am I taking responsibility? And then they're going to have my name on the dartboard, right? And they'll be throwing darts at it. Damn you, Kristin. Because it is hard to switch your mindset to no blaming or complaining about anything other than what you got in front of you and what you can do to fix it. 100% responsibility. The other thing I would say is look at all the tools that are at your disposal. I mean, think about it. My boys navigated a public school system, K through 12, all AP, right? All advanced placement, all top honors, and most times with no textbooks because they weren't available in Braille or they took so long and my guys were moving too fast. How do you do that? You have to have a plethora of tools, including plan A, B, and C. Rarely does it work for a blind person to get through plan A. You got to have B and C. So I would say harness all those tools and keep adding to the toolbox. That's going to get you through.
I love it. All right. Well, where do we find you?
KristinSmedley.com is where everything that I do lands. You can also look at thrivingblindacademy.org to see what we have going on. And Kristin, I always say, is 2 I's. I'm the mom with the blind kids. I got an IN. I'm not an EN, right? But KristinSmedley.com is where you can find everything, including the books.
Hey, by the way, if you want to raise money for the foundation, we've got plenty of races, Spartans, Tough Mudders, et cetera, near you. I'll just give you entries. You want 1,000 of them, 10,000, or whatever you want, and you could push them out and keep all the money.
Oh my gosh, that would be incredible. I love the Spartan. I did the DECA for my 50th, going into my 51st year.
We don't believe you're 50. You're not a day over 30. But let's figure that out. It's on us. You could bring the whole foundation to DECA, to Spartan, to Tough Mudder, anything you want. It's on us. Figure out a way to energize that community even further.
Oh man, thanks. That would be incredible because that's the other thing that we do is we get out there. We're not encouraging the blind community to sit on the couch. They need to be out there involved in all this stuff too.
All right. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Joe.